Hey everyone, it's me Vivian and welcome back to my channel. Given that it's currently internship season here for my fellow Aussie friends, I thought that now would be a really good time to switch things up from my usual data science content and do a bit more of a casual chit chat video where I spill the tea and go through my experience applying for internships across the financial services industry, in particular the risk and analytics division here in Sydney, Australia. I also wanted to call out that the general process of applying, doing the video interview, doing the online testing and the assessment center remains pretty constant across different business divisions and also across different companies, especially in the more established companies that we're going to be talking about today. So if you are here and you have recently applied or you are thinking of applying for a role in the tech industry or in consulting or accounting or possibly human resources, then the tips and processes that I share in today's video should still be relevant and help you guys out. So when I was frantically applying for jobs around 5 to 7 years ago, I looked everywhere online for really any information that I could find. I would spend a lot of time on Glassdoor and Whirlpool forums, and sometimes even just cold messaging people who had done internships previous to me. Generally nobody would reply and I would be left in the dark with no clue of what to expect. So I know that a video like this would have been really helpful for me back then, so I thought, you know what, why not put together a video to try help some other people out there. So hopefully after watching this you guys can be a bit more confident knowing that you know a bit more of what the process is going to be like and some of the questions that you guys might be able to expect. In today's video, I'm going to cover the general process of quite a few of these different companies and the internship process, the questions that I got asked, as well as a general guide to the salary that you can expect to get if you were successful for the role. I'm also going to leave timestamps down below in case you guys want to skip through the video to get to whichever company that you are applying for. Also wanted to add that I made it to the final round for a lot of these companies, so I think that I have a pretty good grasp on the process and what to expect. I know you guys might also think, what, this is literally your experience from 5 to 6 years ago, how is it still going to be relevant today? But the funny thing is I have a lot of friends in junior years and they've all gone through this process sometime across the last several years, and I found out that like a lot of the process doesn't change, the general structure still remains identical. So these tips should still really remain relevant. And as a disclaimer, this is just my personal experience. I'm not here trying to brag or anything. I just really want to help some of you guys out there. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. I've also got my laptop here because I have a lot of the questions that I got asked saved for reference. So yeah, let's get started. So let's kick off with the big 4 accounting firms. That's KPMG, EY, PwC and Deloitte. So I have personally made it to quite a few of these assessment centers, and I know that the process is really similar between all of them, so I'm just going to group them together and sort of give you an example on what to expect. I believe that there are 2 batches of internship applications. Some might open up earlier during the year, so for example in April, but second round intakes generally open up again in July, so make sure you are applying right now. In terms of the online testing, it's either an SHL online test or a Rebellion theme park hero gaming sort of situation, which I think you guys are pretty familiar with already if you have applied for any internships before. And I think the online testing is generally automated, so it's not like they've already screened your resume and then they've progressed you to the next round. I think you normally do both of these at the same time before anyone from HR is going to review your application. In terms of the video, so from my personal experience, it took them a really long time to get back to me from initial application to video, just because I think that there are so many candidates who apply for the role and people are busy and HR takes a while to, you know, screen through all the different applications. As a general guide as to what to expect, my own PwC video interview, I only got asked 2 questions, and it was, how do you deal with a conflict in priorities? And the second one was, what type of clients are you looking at working with? If you guys are successful past this, you will then be invited straight to the final assessment center, which is generally split up into 3 or 4 main sections, which I'm going to go through right now. So there is going to be a group task, and for me, I noticed that the group task was really similar between the different Big Four accounting firms. You're going to be split into groups of like 6 on a table. I'm not sure how it's going to work over Zoom. I think COVID has really put a dent in all the application processes. But for us, we were in tables of 6, and we were all given a unique brief with different advantages and disadvantages. And as a group of 6, we had to come together and discuss which of our options was going to be the best one. And during all this discussion, there is going to be someone from the company sitting on your table observing how you work in a group. So make sure you're not too arrogant, you are very clear when it comes to your turn to start presenting. You clearly have, the risks and the benefits written out, and you are very concise when it comes to how you present. Then there is going to be an individual task which comes off the back of this group assessment. You're going to be asked to write a letter to the CEO to pitch your recommendation. So why is the recommendation that you've picked the best, and why should the business go with that? And the very last part of this interview is a partner interview, which some people might think, oh, that's extremely scary because the partner is super high up in the company and it could be really intimidating. And I completely understand. Like, I was so nervous, so sweaty right before my interview. You're generally asked pretty similar questions across different companies. So I got asked, why this company? So it could be why Deloitte, and it could also be why are you applying for, let's say, risk? How will a job at Deloitte shape your corporate career? Why do you want this job? So as some advice, I would just say to follow the STAR method. So that is, describe the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So try to be concise, structure your answers according to this method, and really just try to show your personality. And to wrap it up, I think that in terms of salary across the Big Four, it's pretty consistent, and I would say it's on the lower end. So the Big Four pay in a package, so it's more like a combined compensation that you get, which would also include your superannuation, which is now 10% of your base salary. So I think that, they pay across somewhere between a $55,000 to a $70,000 package, which is probably a base pay of around 50 to 60K AUD for your reference. So not the best salary out of the companies that I'm going to talk through today, but I think they generally take in a lot of interns, so it's a really good way to get your foot through the corporate door. So now that we've covered off the Big Four accounting companies, let's move on to the Big Four banks. So I personally only applied for Westpac and Commonwealth Bank, just because I think NAB was based in Melbourne and I didn't want to relocate. In terms of application, I know that Westpac and CommBank have both just opened up the applications for this year's intake, so make sure you guys get on that as soon as you can. I applied mid-July for both of these companies. I applied for risk within Westpac and analytics within CommBank, and I ended up making it to both the assessment centers for these two companies. I believe that once you apply, you get the online testing straight away. So for Westpac, that was a Rebellion test, which, was the theme park hero online testing. My general tip for you for that is, so make sure you don't use a keypad, use a mouse, just because I think it requires you to be dragging and dropping and clicking really quickly. So don't be like me the first time round, where I actually used a keypad and it was just extremely slow and really hard. And maybe also have your phone next to you and take photos of the screen when it comes to what you have to remember. CommBank for me was the SHL test, which I think is a very common kind of online testing that a lot of companies use. So once you are successful for this, they will generally get back to you within like a 2 to 3 week window when they finish assessing all the applications, and then they will send you a video interview invitation. This is again in a very similar process to that of the Big Four accounting firms, where you're going to be given a series of questions and maybe 30 seconds to think of a response, and then 1 minute to actually answer the question. The question that I got for my video interview was, I'm going to put them up on the screen as well, but the first one was, what is your name, your background, your degree, and your year of completion. The next was, why are you applying for this bank and why this business unit in particular? The next one was, how do you keep up to date with industry trends, and can you please describe an industry trend that we have right now? The next one is a pretty common behavioral question. It was, give an example of when you were working in a team. And then the last question was, can you also name an example where you worked under pressure? So again, my advice is to be concise. I know it's hard when you're literally talking to a camera, but also just try to use the STAR method that I had talked about earlier, and yeah, you should be okay. Well, I guess the final stage is, if you pass the video interview, you would normally be invited to an assessment center, and this is again the final stage of their process. So again, the assessment center is split up into 3 stages, just like the one for the Big 4 accounting firms, but I think the questions are slightly different. My experience across both Westpac and CommBank were very similar in terms of all the questions asked as well, so I could really learn a lot from each process. As they say, the more interviews you do, the better that you get and the more confident that you are, because you can always learn from your previous failures. So again, you are split into maybe groups of 5 or 6, and you're given a case study where you have to brainstorm a business problem. So the one that I got was, how do we improve marketing for a new app? Let's say the CommBank app is being relaunched and this new program is coming out. How can we improve marketing? So your group has to come together and go about different methods to solve it. You have maybe 10 minutes to discuss. So some tips I would say is, make sure you cater for different people's banking habits. Some people like to use online banking, others like to use their app, others could be older and like to still call up the phone. Also plan for how you're going to design the app, the budgeting that you have, whether you have $1 million to market, exposure, possible tech issues, privacy issues, all the different risks, and that you want to be able to plan accordingly. And then following, you have to make a presentation on your final ideas. The next step is an individual presentation where you're given 15 minutes to write. So instead of your letter to the CEO, this time you have to present a speech. The question that I got was, how can we use data to solve this particular issue? I cannot remember, but you essentially are going to be given a business question and 15 minutes to write and then present your speech. The final stage of the interview was a 2-on-1 interview, which for me was completely behavioral, and this was just with different leaders across the business. Yeah, it was pretty casual. In terms of salary, I think that the Big 4 banks, they pay more of a base salary. So rather than your previous package, we're just getting a base figure with super, and super is going to be on top. So you'd be looking at around a 65k AUD base, as well as a 10% superannuation on top. So the next one that I want to talk about is Macquarie Group, where I also applied for the risk management group. And I believe when I was applying, they wanted me to select a few substreams within risk. So I ended up picking, I think, credit and market risk. So the online testing for Macquarie, I don't believe is automated, because I had applied, but I only got online testing like a couple, maybe up to a week later. This was also SHL testing. So I was expecting to get like an email after the online testing saying, if you're successful, then, come around to an in-person interview. But I actually got a random phone call out of the blue, and it was also from a no caller ID, which I don't normally pick up. So they ended up calling me another time, and this one was just, a quick 10 to 15 minute phone call, and it was more like, walk me through your resume, why Macquarie, why risk, and why did you select these, sub-streams under risk. The next part of the process was a bit strange. They emailed me saying that they wanted me to go into their offices to do a supervised in-person online testing. So essentially it was 3 hours of my day where I went into the office and sat there on a computer and did the entire online test again. I'm not sure why this is the case. Apparently it was just a spot pick of random applicants to make sure that we weren't cheating when we were doing it online ourselves. After that, I think I waited like probably another couple of weeks, and I finally, like I had lost all hope at the time, but then I finally then got a email saying that I had progressed to a in-person interview with the director. However, this interview I found extremely difficult. It was much more technical than any of the Big Four accounting or the Big Four banks. And I remember they gave me like pen and paper, and they wanted me to do some kind of like Black-Scholes finance statistical proof, and I had no idea. This was then followed by a whole bunch of market making questions, and from a math stats background, I had no idea what these were, and I thought it was like a joke that I was being asked these kind of questions in the interview. I think that if you guys come from, you know, consulting or investment banking, then maybe you have a better approach to answering these questions. But at the time, you know, a stats background like me, I had no idea. So I actually got asked 2 of these questions, which I'm going to share right now. So the first one, how much bamboo do pandas eat across the world? And the second one is, how much would you charge for a window cleaner to clean all the windows in the Sydney CBD? So these questions sounded really funny to me at the time, but I think looking back, they really wanted to measure my constructive thinking. Yeah, so maybe do some practice. I'm pretty sure Macquarie asks this for quite a few different teams, so this could be a good area for you to study up on. Yeah, so I didn't get past that in-person interview. I think in terms of salary at Macquarie, depending on which team you were in, I believe you'd be looking at either a 75k to like an 85k package. So again, this would include your super. So now that we've covered off, you know, all the main larger companies, I'm now going to move into a few more like data specific companies, which probably won't apply to any other industries other than, you know, risk, analytics, data science, or tech. So for those of you who are here for like, you know, consulting or accounting, feel free to drop off, or, you know, you can stick around. And, you know, I think some of these salaries and some of the questions that I got asked can be quite fascinating. I think that the main difference between a large company and a smaller company is the way that their process is being set up. I think in terms of the application dates, I think they still open around like July, August, but you might need to check their website if their process isn't as established. I also find that the process tends to move a lot faster in these smaller companies. I would also say that generally the first round, you might just get a phone call from them straight away. So for example, when I applied for Quantium, which is a data science company headquartered in Sydney, in the third interview, I got asked, you know, why Quantium and why I thought, you know, data analytics was the way moving forward. I then progressed into the in-person interview. I just was in a room with this one interviewer, and they asked me like a bunch of, you know, data consulting questions. So Quantium is more of like a data consulting agency where you work with like, you know, different stakeholders, and you have a whole bunch of data and you want to help them solve problems. So looking back, the questions that I got asked were all really like related to data consulting. So pretend like, you know, I'm a person on the street. How would you explain this fancy idea to me so that I can understand? Which is, you know, all about being able to explain really complicated things and put them into simple terms for the normal person to understand. I also got asked a few questions on, you know, how would you analyze large amounts of data? You know, what steps would you take to solve a problem? And, you know, your classic behavioral question, like, you know, what is one time that you had to consult with someone? The other few questions that I got asked, which were probably like specific to a data company, were, you know, what kind of data can you extract from, you know, how someone uses their phone? I also got asked, what do people use the internet for? If you've passed this in-person interview, you are then going to be invited to an assessment center of sorts, which is where, you know, everyone comes together. And again, there's a couple of group activities where you have to work on a project together and then present back to the board. I remember there was also a 1-hour technical test, which involved both like a stats test as well as some kind of written response, I guess, to measure your analytical and also your communication skills. And then there was like a final like 2-minute like impromptu speech where you just have to get up and do a speech on whatever topic you want in 2 minutes. Yeah, so that was the interview process that I had for Quantium, and I believe like a couple of other smaller data analytics firms also follow a relatively similar process. But of course, if they're really small and not really established, I don't think they would be having an assessment center. It might just be a series of individual or two-on-one interviews. In terms of salary, I would think that you're probably looking at around, a 70k to 75k package for an intern, which would again include, your 10% super. And the last company or bunch of companies that I want to speak to, I think some of you maths, stats, or data science people would be pretty interested in is your proprietary trading firms. That's your Jane Street, Optiver, I think IMC, Eclipse, Acuna, which are generally quite difficult to get into. I also applied for a couple of these. Again, applications open in July. I believe they're all open right now. The funny thing was, for both of these companies, I think I had applied for them in the previous year, and I had already made my way through a couple of rounds of interviews. So the recruiter actually knew this, so she was like, because you've interviewed with us last year, we can then just progress you straight to the second or third round, which I thought, was a pretty sweet way to just skip the beginning of the process. I remember for Jane Street, it was just a phone call with someone over in Amsterdam, where he would ask me a bunch of, statistics and probability questions. I can put a couple of them up on the screen just as an example of what you would be expecting. I remember they said no pen and paper, so it was more to know, how good are you at doing mental maths, just because a lot of the job would require you to be doing quick calculations in your head. Yes, a lot of market making questions, probability, statistical questions. And for Optiver, I remember after I passed the first 2 phone interviews, I was asked to go into their offices to do their, I think the infamous maths test, which was at the time done on pen and paper, and it was done without a calculator. So I've always been pretty good at mental math and quick calculations, so I actually found the test relatively straightforward, and I had time to go back and check. From memory, I think there was a maths and fractions section out of 80. So it was 80 multiple choice questions, and you have around 10 minutes to solve them. I think I got 76 in that paper, and the pass mark was in the low 50s, or 53, 54 for reference. And there was another pattern booklet where there were 25 patterns, and the pass mark was 18, and I got 21 in that one. So you do the test, you hand your paper in, and then the HR will call you back to let you know if you've progressed to the next round, which was an in-person interview. In this round, I got grilled pretty hard on my academic transcript, and I also got asked a lot of probability questions on the spot, which I sort of panicked and had some verbal diarrhea. It was a really challenging process, which I think I learned a lot from. In terms of the salary that you'd be expecting with these jobs, I've heard that the culture can be relatively, cutthroat. Turnover is pretty fast, you either go up the ranks or you end up leaving. Your starting salary would probably be in the 6 figures with a bonus of up to 50% or whatever it is. I'm not sure, but I know that these numbers go up significantly as you stay there longer and longer. Alright, so that's all the tips that I'm going to share today. I also want to let you know that I have personally probably applied for 50 to 100 different internship and grad applications and gotten rejected to almost all of them, but it really just takes one offer to flip that all around. I know that rejections can be really disheartening, to always receive rejection after rejection, and I am no stranger to that. I got rejected from so many companies that I thought I would definitely get into in a row, and it was only until the very end of the internship process where all my friends already had existing offers, and then suddenly I got several offers in a row. So I think it just really takes time, it takes confidence, and know that every interview that you do, try and learn from those mistakes. Take the feedback that the interviewer gives you, whether or not that's you're speaking too softly, or you need to be a bit more organized. Try and take all that feedback and channel it into your next interview. Yeah, with that in mind, hopefully you guys do well in your upcoming internship interviews. I hope that my video here has helped you in one way or another, or at least given you an insight into what to expect in the process. and hopefully you won't be as nervous as I was when I was sitting in the waiting room for every single interview. So please leave a comment in the video below if you've had a similar interview experience to me, you know, just to help out this community, and let me know if there are any other topics that you would like to see me cover. Otherwise, I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!